Paul McGinnis has been a puppeteer on Sesame Street and on various Muppets and Henson productions since 2001, and he's with us here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Now, first of all, let's go straight back to the very beginning of your puppetry life. How did you first get into it?
It was the Muppet Show and Sesame Street. I grew up watching those and just becoming obsessed really young with the puppetry and all that magic. And I just never stopped watching those shows. So eventually I tried to build some puppets and started to perform, and that was around high school, and then I was off to the races.
And when you first started watching it, did you immediately know that was what you wanted to do, or did you first of all enjoy it, and then it took a bit of time for you to realise, hey, there's people performing these characters, maybe I could do that?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess those are two separate things. So I don't know at what point I realized they were puppets and not actual living things. At some point I obviously did. But when I realized I could actually perform them, that was actually a little bit later. I was just a big fan, and this was before the internet, so I was kind of the only fan I knew. I was a bit of a lunatic about it. I used to teach classes in high school. I'd ask the history teacher to take a day off so I could teach a class on puppetry. It was really weird. But I think sometime around that point, I started trying to build. I never became a builder. I was terrible at it. But then I started to perform just to see if I could do it, I guess. And I think it was around then that I thought, well, maybe this is something I could do.
Yeah, and the building side, I think a lot of performers have came in from that end. They've started building and realised that they can perform. Do you find building or performing easier than the other?
100% easier and more enjoyable to perform for me. I tried to build, I did, and I wasn't terrible at it. I really wasn't, but I wasn't great, and I didn't. The main thing was I just didn't really enjoy it. I never got to a level that was of anything professional at all. But I did not really have the skills I think required, and more importantly, I didn't have the passion for it.
And I suppose with performing, you get to be the star of the show, although with puppets it's not as clearly you, but it's a lot more acting than building.
Yeah, I guess so. It was just, building was never something I think I was grateful the day that I was able to come to terms with the fact that was not something I could or wanted to do.
So then how did you first get to work with Sesame Street and the Muppets? Did you join one of them first?
Yeah, I first worked on Sesame Street, and then I got to work on the Muppets. And the way I got on Sesame Street, I had been working on a show in New York called The Book of Pooh, which was a Disney Channel show about Winnie the Pooh. And they used tabletop Bunraku style puppets, which are puppets that require about 3 puppeteers to perform. And I really threw myself into that. And there was also a lot of Sesame Street puppeteers who worked on that show. So it just so happened that I ended up getting a call one day from Sesame Street asking me to come in and work one day. I never actually auditioned. I never actually found out who recommended me either. I'm assuming it was one of the Sesame Street puppeteers that I worked with on Book of Pooh. But I worked one day in 2001, I think it was. I can date that because I know it was right after 9/11, because we were doing a song called "We Are All Earthlings" with Jill Scott, and it was kind of about coming together after 9/11. So that's where I can date it, but I'm not even sure what episode that is. I think I'd have to look that up.
And was it quite daunting going into Sesame Street, which at that point had still been a long running show, even though that was 20 years ago now?
Absolutely. Well, it was just mind-blowing. It was so surreal to walk onto that set that I knew so well, and to see those puppets that I knew so well, and to see them in real life. I think everyone has that experience when you walk on that set.
And because you'd been trying to build puppets for a while and being a fan of these characters, were you also a fan of some of the performers and maybe were a bit starstruck meeting them?
Absolutely. huge fan, absolutely starstruck.
Yeah.
I had actually met Carol Spinney,
Uh-huh.
who performed Big Bird and Oscar, not just to mention two of his characters.
Mm.
I'd met him years before when I went to the 1993 Puppeteers of America Festival in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I was still in college at the time, and he was very nice. And what a pleasure to know that one of your heroes could be so kind and thoughtful.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, walking onto that set and seeing everyone else was.
Yeah. And do you have any favourite memories of Carol Spinney that you've remembered from the years you worked alongside him or in the same set?
I have so many memories of Carol Spinney.
Yeah.
So many stories. The most recent one, and I think probably the most special one, was the last time I saw him, which was 2 years ago when we shot the 50th season anniversary show.
Yeah.
And they had brought back so many old cast members, and it was just a big reunion.
Yeah.
And he was there, and he was very ill at the time. He was in a wheelchair, and his wife Debbie was with him, and they had him be part of not puppeteering, but just being part of this big final scene with just a wide shot with everyone celebrating.
Oh,
and that shot took a while to set up, and I just happened to be puppeteering on the floor right in front of his wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pretty quiet that day because I don't know, it might have been a little overwhelming, but I think it was just a kind of quiet day for him. But he did beckon me over on one of the down moments between shots, and so kind of sidled up to him, and he kind of whispered to me, "Paul." It's like, "Yeah, Carol, hi." It's like, and all he said to me was, "How is that beautiful wife of yours?" It just made my day, and it made her day. Her name is Haley Jenkins. She's also a puppeteer. She's phenomenal. And he actually was part of my, when I asked her to marry me, I made a video as part of the proposal. And I asked Carol if he would be the final part of that proposal video. Basically, if he would have Big Bird introduce me, because I was going to play the video on a screen in a bar or somewhere.
Wow.
And so he did it, and we shot this. We actually did it on the Sesame Street set, and this camera swept all the way across the Sesame Street set, went through the window of Hooper's store, and Big Bird was sitting there. He's like, "Hi, Haley." I'm not going to do a Big Bird voice, but he said, "Hi, Haley. I hear someone very special has a question for you." and then the video ended, and I came out and asked her to marry me. But anyway, that when all he said to me is, "How's your beautiful wife?" That just was a wonderful, loving way to end that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it shows his dedication that even though he was unable to perform physically anymore, he would still show up and do his lines vocally. He never really wanted to give it up. He was dedicated to his roles.
He was the healthiest puppeteer on the set. He was just years before he passed away, he was still roller skating in Big Bird. It was unbelievable how dedicated and full of life that man was. An absolute continuing inspiration to all of us.
Yeah, for sure. And then how did you cross over into the Muppets with a capital M franchise? Was that kind of also a recommendation from the puppeteers that you'd worked with on Sesame?
I think so. I don't remember. I didn't audition for the Muppets either. And I was trying to, because you had said you were going to ask me about the Muppets and Sesame Street. So I was trying to wrap my brain to figure out what the first project I worked with them on is. And I actually can't remember, but it must have been somewhere around 2008, 2007. And yeah, I think that would have been a recommendation as well. I don't think I ever worked with them. It might have been Muppets Letters to Santa.
Yeah, I guess that's about right. Can't think of much else around that time, really, unless it was a YouTube video or something.
Yeah.
And what have been some of your favourite things that you've worked on with the Muppets? Because, you know, you're not one of the core performers, but I guess you get to have a lot of fun trying on characters in the background.
Yeah. My favorite thing that I ever did with the Muppets wasn't actually a filmed thing. I worked on the Muppets, the movie, back in 2011, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
But my favorite thing was these live shows that we recently did. We did a live show of them called The Muppets Take the Bowl, the Hollywood Bowl, and then we did another live show, The Muppets Take the O2 in London.
Yeah.
And I got to perform the legs for Kermit, but we had this bit with Bobby Moynihan where Kermit and Bobby were trying to dance, and Bobby didn't feel good about it because Kermit had all the steps down. And so the bit was that we brought out these huge Kermit legs and strapped them to Bobby Moynihan's waist. And I actually sat underneath Bobby and I performed these huge Kermit legs in front of this audience. And it was a lot of fun because I got to choreograph the whole thing and work it all out. And that was probably one of my favorite moments with the Muppets.
Yeah.
Not even something that was filmed.
It's great that you got to choreograph the whole thing, because from what I've heard from other performers, those live shows was really a great chance for the performers to have their input that they might not have had in previous projects.
Yeah. It was I mean, that was kind of Jim's thing, right? Jim Henson's brought people. He was smart enough to bring people who were more talented than him and smarter than him into the family, and then just let them do their things. And so, you know, with the Muppets, that philosophy, especially behind those shows, was the best idea wins. So just let's make this the best show we can. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, a philosophy on a lot of shows that I've worked on is let's make this collaborative, you know, let's really try to figure out the funniest, quickest, the funniest or the best way to put this particular thing together.
Yeah. And going back just a bit, you mentioned that you'd worked on Book of Pooh before Sesame Street. So how did you break into puppetry professionally to end up working on that show?
That was a show that I auditioned for. That was a Mitchell Kriegman production. He had that going, I think, after the second season of Bear in the Big Blue House. It was somewhere around there. Yeah. And so I was in New York at that point, and they had auditions, just kind of an open casting call. And they were these tabletop puppets. They were puppets that required generally 3 puppeteers to manipulate just one puppet, because you've got the whole body, the head, the arms, the legs. Yeah. And I went in and I auditioned, and I guess I did a good job. But I also love that kind of puppetry. I love tabletop, doing like do stuff. I love puppets that really kind of require collaboration of that magnitude to effectively manipulate.
Yeah. And you perform Clem, which is Karli's foster dad in the Sesame Street outreach videos on foster care. What's that like?
That's been really special. Yeah. Karli is a new character that Sesame's created. And she is a kid who is part of the foster system. This puppet character's mother is going through some issues and can't take care of her right now. And so she's got some foster parents that she's staying with. And I play one of the 2 foster parents, Clem. It's been a very special experience.
Yeah, and Sesame Street are kind of all about these interesting characters like that they bring in to show that everybody's situation is different.
Yeah, absolutely. They're doing a lot more of that now as well. It used to be but it used to be done quite a bit for these they call them outreach videos. Yeah. And they would be high quality productions, just as high quality as this shooting Sesame Street itself, but never really broadcast on television. They'd be made for specific communities for specific reasons. There was a whole military families campaign a few years back that really addressed a lot of issues that kids who had parents in the military would face, like parents coming home injured or not coming home, or coming home with mental issues that they had not had perhaps, and seeing how these puppet characters deal with that stuff. So Sesame Street has done lots of different outreach campaigns, and this foster campaign is just one of them. But more recently, they've addressed racial issues, and some of this now is starting to cross over into Sesame Street itself, the actual show. So it's these issues are these new characters are no longer just created for videos that would be sent to these communities or used by these communities, but they're open and available for the world as a whole, which I think is very special as well.
Yeah. I think, did I read recently that they're introducing a homeless character? Although I guess Oscar the Grouch doesn't count if that's the case.
I don't know. That they may be. I do not know about a homeless character. I know that they do have a couple things brewing, stuff I can't really talk about. But yeah, I have not heard about the homeless character, although that may be a thing.
Yeah, sure. Although it'd be interesting because most of the characters, the puppet characters in Sesame Street, are of a child's age. So it'd be a bit weird to have a homeless child on its own. That's a bit questionable. You need to get social services involved there.
Yeah, maybe. That's the interesting thing about Sesame Street. They're all. I don't know if they're all children in terms of age. I mean, Elmo is certainly a child, but I don't know if you categorize Ernie and Bert as children.
To know.
So I think there are different age groups represented by these puppets, if not specifically addressed, stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess sometimes ages aren't assigned. It's like with the Muppets, we don't really know their ages. Some of them act like children, but are they? Right. I don't know, because they're old enough to have relationships and stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think the Muppets are mainly adults. I think you can peg them, right? You can take a guess. I'm sure they have their assigned ages too, but if I just had to guess, I'd say that Kermit and Piggy are adults. I'd say maybe Scooter is maybe a little younger, maybe like a college intern. Robin's a child. You definitely got Statler and Mulder for old. I think it's with the Muppets, the classic Muppets. I think it's a little easier to take a guess at least at what age range we're talking about. Yeah,
because they've got very strong personalities, and you can sort of tell. And Fozzie, I don't know, I guess he's an adult but still quite childlike, which I guess a lot of people are like.
Yeah, childlike. I feel like, maybe childlike. I feel like he's got a lot of the same insecurities a lot of us do. I think that's what makes these puppets, beyond just being really funny. I think what makes those classic Muppets work so well is that a lot of their personality traits are really traits that we all hold. Like I can see a lot of Fozzie in me, see a lot of Gonzo in me. I don't know. Maybe we all have a little bit of Diva Miss Piggy in us as well. They're all very specific archetypes.
Yeah, definitely.
So relatable, I think, is the right word.
Yeah, we can relate to them definitely so well, and that's why it works. And I guess to an extent that's why Sesame Street works, because mostly the puppets are children, and it's children that watch it, so they can see themselves in the characters.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent that's true. But I don't think that's a necessity. I mean, as a kid, I loved the Muppet Show, and I don't think they're all children. And I love Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And a lot of those puppets and characters are definitely older, for sure.
Oh yeah, like Kings and stuff.
Yeah, Lady Lane Fairchild kind of reminds me of a couple of features of it.
Yeah. So how does working on Sesame Street differ from the Muppets? Is there a different environment because one of them's more of a charity and the other's a commercial Disney thing? Or because they're both kind of inspired by Jim Henson, is it still a similar kind of friendly atmosphere?
Yeah, for sure. They're both definitely good atmospheres. what did I think of the difference? There's so many people who work on both shows.
Yeah.
But Sesame Street's been around for a long time, and we're talking 50 years here. So that show works like a machine. You've got Frankie Biondo, who's a cameraman on that show, who's been a cameraman on that show since the very first episode. He's been around for 51 years, and so there's just a fluidity that is very smooth in terms of what gets done there. And with the Muppets, I don't know, maybe with the Muppets, you get different crews in. Maybe that's the difference. While you may have some of the same performers in front, you're always working with a slightly different set as a whole, because for each project you're bringing maybe a different gaffer or a different lighting crew, or you name it. So I think in terms of what's the difference between working on those two sets, I think maybe there's an overall family unit that goes back 50 years of Sesame Street, from not just the performers, but to everyone working on the set, versus a Muppet production where you've got new people behind the camera often.
Yeah, because a lot of the time with every project is a completely different crew directing it. I think the only exemption perhaps is when the last two movies this last decade, it was mostly the same team, and maybe originally when Jim Henson was at the helm it would still be quite similar, but yeah, Sesame Street, you're making the same show every time, so they'd keep the same people. They don't need to try and find new people unless someone's leaving.
You've got the same structure. You've got the same location as well. So, and it's, it's a family.
Yeah. And you worked on the Happy Time Murders as well a few years ago.
I did, yeah. Yeah, that was fun. I did not work the whole shoot. I actually only was brought in to work 3 days on that. But I was able to do a character. Now, I mainly was brought in because there was supposed to be a scene at the end of the movie where Bill Beretta's character was going to be a Bunraku tabletop style puppet, and he was going to do a whole dance number. And I've done on my YouTube page, I've done a lot of like dance videos with puppets, and I really love doing it. I think that Drew Massey and Alice Janine, who were working on the show, knew that. So Drew called me and had me come out for 3 days, and we choreographed and worked out a whole dance routine for Bill Beretta's character with Bill.
Yeah.
And we shot it. It was pretty cool. And then it got cut. It got left on the cutting room floor, unfortunately.
Like a lot of that film.
Yeah. I think a lot of that film got edited. But yeah, I did do one other character, which was fun when I was there. But yeah, that was my involvement with that.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of that film didn't turn out how Brian Henson intended it to be, but I think nevertheless it's not as bad as everyone seems to think it is. I
feel the same way. Is that funny? I really do. I never understood. Maybe it was because I only came on for 3 days. So as someone who was involved in the production, I don't think I really saw the arc of perhaps what they were trying to do and what happened, or whatever you name it. I just saw the movie when it came out, and I loved it. I thought it was so funny. And I'm so glad I did. I mean, I sincerely thought it was a funny movie. So I get why people. I think people probably have legitimate feelings towards that film one way or the other, but my experience was one of it.
I guess maybe the reason is that the same problem that Jim Henson had when he tried to sell the Muppet Show was that people think puppets shouldn't be doing adult stuff, whereas maybe if you replace the puppet characters in that film with humans, people wouldn't think of the film so badly.
I think I don't know if that movie would have worked as well if it had just been humans. I think.
That's the thing. Yeah, well, I guess a lot of the plot wouldn't work because there's a whole thing of puppets don't kill puppets or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And Earth to Ned, you worked on that. That's a kind of newish Disney Plus series from last year as well, right? What did you do on that?
Earth and Ned, again, just another show that I worked one episode on. I was out in LA working on Crank Yankers, which is a show I've been doing for about 6 seasons. And
Yeah.
they shoot that out in LA. And so they brought me into work one day on Earth and Ned. But
Mm.
it was really fun. Oh my God. Have you seen it?
I haven't actually had the time. I always keep forgetting. I will watch a couple of episodes one day.
Yeah. It's basically a show where this alien comes down to Earth and
Mm.
he's got a mission when he comes down to Earth. But once he gets here, he realizes he just loves human culture. And so
Yeah.
he starts his own talk show. And he's got a sidekick, and he brings on real life celebrities, and it was so good. The puppets were on the set. Was first of all, the set was huge. They shot it
Yeah.
on the Jim Henson lot
Mm.
on La Brea in Los Angeles at the Jim Henson Studios, and it was
Yeah.
just a massive stage. And then the puppets themselves were actually quite big, and the main character was manipulated by 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 puppeteers.
Wow.
And there was just a lot going on to make that show
Yeah.
the way it did. So I was thrilled to be part of it for the couple days that I worked on it. And I have watched the show, and I think it just came out spectacularly. All the puppeteers and the writers and everything, it's a smash. So I hope it comes back.
Yeah, hopefully. And what have you been up to more recently? Have you still been working on Sesame Street during this COVID time?
So I have not. They have been shooting some stuff for Sesame Street,
Mm.
but a lot of after March of last year, a lot of production just shut down for quite a while,
Yeah.
and a lot of Sesame Street during those months started to shoot remotely. So they send the puppeteers a whole setup, lights, backdrop, sound equipment, um, and then they would work with them to shoot segments that could be mixed together Zoom style or just solo, but shot from the puppeteers' houses. It's kind of an interesting thing. You'll see the products of a lot of those early months during COVID, showing puppeteers' bedrooms, or it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of great content during that time as well, and they never lost the drive of what curriculum wise makes Sesame Street so strong. But I personally I did not do anything on Sesame Street. I know what they were doing with the puppeteers. I know a lot of them. They've told me. But more for me, more recently, I've been working. We're in the middle of shooting Crank Yankers right now. That's the 6th season. So I've been working on that for the last few months, and then I took a break from that. I'm working on Don Quixote right now, which is a show that's been shot for PBS in Chicago. And then I'll go back to Crank Yankers to finish off that season in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So I've been bouncing between those two shows. And then other than that, just,
And about the COVID filming, one thing I'm still thinking about is, I think last summer, Miss Piggy had an interview on Zoom or whatever, and she was lying in bed. And I don't know how Eric Jacobson did it, because I don't think he has a hole underneath his bed that he can put his arm up. He must have been in a very uncomfortable position.
So this was during COVID, and she did an interview from bed?
Yes. Like under the covers, just like, I don't need to get out of bed.
Oh, I've got to go see that. I shouldn't speak on it. I'd imagine that he just sat on the edge of the bed.
Yeah, he might have just been out of frame. That would make sense.
I'd have to go back and see how that was done. But yeah, maybe he just sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped the blankets around and then shot to an angle like that. That's great. The Muppets did a lot of not just Sesame Street. The Muppets did a lot of content during COVID as well, which is great.
Yeah.
And they just finished shooting their very first Halloween special.
Oh, yes.
They shot it at Disneyland. And it's going to be, I think the basic idea is that Gonzo and Pepe are visiting a haunted mansion. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But something along those lines. And I know that they brought all the other characters out as well. But but yeah, that's in the middle of being edited right now, and that'll be out soon.
Yeah.
I'm actually not sure exactly what the storyline is. I know those two characters are
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, I hope Uncle Deadly's in it because he'll have a role he's born to play.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled with what Matt Vogel has done with Uncle Deadly in the
Yeah.
past few years. What a phenomenal picking up the gauntlet and running with that character. I'd say the
Yeah.
same thing about David Rudman and Scooter, man.
Yeah.
Uh, I just, those characters have been given a new life by the
Yeah.
performers, and it does just bring me so much joy. The Muppets, the more recent Muppet show that was titled The Muppets, just I think some of the stuff they did with Scooter was spectacular.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you get to watch that show?
Yes, and it's another one that doesn't do too well with people's opinions, but there are some great moments, and Uncle Deadly's character is so great in that. That's probably the biggest platform he's had so far. And yeah, Scooter was really developed in that series as well in a way that he hadn't before. I think David Rudman said that part of it was because they got rid of that Muppet Show jacket and put him in normal clothes.
That may be the case. That totally may be the case. Yeah. Was it? Oh, it was in the most recent Muppets Now series that came out on Disney Plus. They did a segment with Peter Lintz's Walter character and Uncle Deadly, and it was so funny. I don't know if you've seen that.
Was that like the swords one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And great puppetry too. It's so solid.
Yes.
It's just.
I wonder, like, the performers must be scared if they're underneath loads of swords. One could fall at any time.
Yeah, for sure. That's when you're really happy to have great wranglers.
Yes.
Really lock those props in securely, right? And then you all do a lot of rehearsal. But that particular segment, if anyone listening gets a chance to watch the Muppets Now segment with Walter and Uncle Deadly on Disney Plus, check it out. That's one of the real joys about working with, becoming friends with fellow puppeteers, is that when they do amazing work, it's just so joyful on this other level, because as an observer, as a watcher of TV, you can just enjoy it on that level, but then you can just really enjoy it because you know your friends and you can be so happy for them as well. And so when so many of your friends are creating this awesome content, it just adds a whole other layer to your enjoyment of the product as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And overall, what would you say your favourite thing that you've ever worked on is with your puppetry career?
Oh gosh, that is a very hard question to answer. Because I have so many favorite things. I think probably one of my, I'm not going to say my favorite, I think one of my most favorite projects I ever worked on was the 2004 Broadway tour of Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh.
I performed Audrey 2, which is this plant character. There are 4 different iterations of this plant. The puppeteers get to do 3 of those 4 iterations during this musical. And it's just a great musical to begin with. I loved doing that puppetry. And then because it was a tour for a year, I just became really close friends with everyone on that show. And we still, after 16, 17 years now, we're still all friends. During COVID, we got together for a couple of big COVID parties and, parties during COVID. COVID parties.
Like a chickenpox party for COVID.
But I think that was probably one of my most favorite things. I loved working at the O'Neill Puppetry Conference, which was a conference that happens every year in Connecticut. And you go there for a week, and at the end of the week, you have created and then you perform for a live audience some show. So it's just a real, trial by fire every time you do it. And that's super exciting. But then I've also loved all the Muppet stuff and Frank Anchors and all the other stuff I've done. So I know I'm trying to weasel out by not saying that I'm a particular favorite thing, but truly, this career has given me so many different moments where I've just had to stop and smile.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess you're enjoying it as well. It's good to have a job that you enjoy.
Absolutely. I mean, I love with any job, you think you have days where you don't feel great about what you're doing. And you have a lot of self-doubt and you name it.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, I've been very lucky to have a job that I enjoy,
Yeah.
for sure.
And are you hopeful that you'll be able to go back to Sesame Street sometime soon and be there and see it all again?
I'm sure I will at some point. I'm
Yeah.
basically, yeah, I'm a day player, so I don't work full seasons.
Mm.
But whenever, hopefully there might be some more stuff with Clem. We'll see.
Yeah.
I know. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to go back and work on that show. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's truly family and
Yeah. Well, if we're interested in keeping up to date with you everywhere, where can we do that?
I'm on Twitter, yay Paul McGinnis.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram, Paul McGinnis Puppetry, and I would say mainly if you go to my YouTube page, Paul McGinnis Puppetry on YouTube, you can see a lot of the stuff I've created on my own. I've created a lot of my own content, and it's mainly like I said before, a lot that has to do with puppets dancing. But I'm really proud of it, and I think that if I were to steer you to anywhere online, I would say go check out that YouTube page and see some of the stuff I've done there.
Great. Well, we'll be sure to. And thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me, Toby.